Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make some soft pretzel bites. So this is a pretzel dough chopped into little pieces and cooked, sort of boiled and then baked, just like pretzels are. And I got the idea from my sister Margaret in Canada. She bought some, I think from Costco, and she loved them, and she'd been going on about them incessantly almost. So I thought I would give them a go myself. It's not a difficult recipe. It's a bread dough basically, and then as I say, you boil them in some water that has baking soda in it, and then take them out, drain them, and put them into the oven and bake them. And very often they come with some salt over the top, and in some instances they come with some brushed with some butter and then tossed or sprinkled with cinnamon sugar. So I'm going to do both of those, but I'm also going to do some with sesame seeds on as well, because I like sesame seeds. So it's not, as I said, it's not a difficult recipe, but it does take a bit of time, as bread dough does, because you have to proof it. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for this I have 600 grams, which is 4 cups based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of bread flour. I have 7 grams, which is 2 1/4 teaspoons or 1 packet of instant yeast. I have 360 millilitres, 1 1/2 cups of lukewarm water, 19 grams, 1 1/2 tablespoons of caster sugar, 28 grams, 2 tablespoons of melted butter, 12 grams, 2 teaspoons of salt. I have 60 grams, which is 5 tablespoons of baking soda. I have 1 egg, which I'm going to beat, and that's for brushing over the top. I have 3 grams, 1 teaspoon of diastatic malt powder. Now I should say that is entirely optional. The effect of diastatic malt powder in the flour is that it makes the bread crumb slightly more tender, and it also helps with browning the outside of the dough as it's baked basically. But this recipe will work perfectly fine without that, but because I have it, I'm going to use it. And then I also have some salt for sprinkling over the top, some sesame seeds for sprinkling over the top, and some cinnamon sugar for sprinkling over the top. So that's all the ingredients. So the first thing we need to do is to mix our dough. And to mix the dough, I'm going to use my Ankarsrum mixer, but any stand mixer, a tilt head stand mixer, will work perfectly fine in exactly the same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my lukewarm water into the bowl, and I'm going to add into that my sugar and yeast, and I'm simply going to mix that around. So that's good like that. So then I'm going to add in about half of my flour, and you don't have to be too precise, but because we're going to add in most of the remainder, if not all of the remainder, as we mix. So that's a decent amount of flour. And at this stage, I'm also going to sprinkle over my optional diastatic malt powder and the salt, and I'm going to pour in my melted butter. And I'm going to mix that on a fairly low speed until it becomes a shaggy dough basically. And that only took a few seconds. So I'm going to continue mixing, adding in more flour, a little bit at a time, maybe half a cup at a time, until the dough comes together into a nice mass really. And I think the sides of the bowl should clean down as well at the same time. You may not need all of the flour, but as much as you need. So my dough has come together, and I have probably about 2 tablespoons of flour left, which I'm not going to use, I don't think. So I'm going to knead this on a medium speed until the dough is sort of fairly smooth and very stretchy. So that's my dough kneaded now, and I kneaded that for about 8 minutes, and I kneaded it on a medium speed. And I will just check that to see how stretchy it is. So I'll pull a piece off, and well, you can see it's very stretchy. So basically I'm going to just form that into a ball. It's still a bit tacky, and I'm going to put that in the bowl, and I'm going to cover it with the lid, and I'm going to leave that to proof until it's doubled in size. It might take about an hour, but I think because of the heat we have today, I think it will take less time than that. But once it's doubled in size, I will come back and we will divide the dough and cut it into little bits ready to cook. And at that point, I'll have my oven preheating to 220 Celsius, 200 Celsius with a fan, 425 Fahrenheit, and I'll have a couple of baking trays with silicone mats or with parchment paper ready to take the dough. And at the same time, I will also be bringing to the boil 2.5 litres, about 10.5 cups of water, and that's going to, we need that to put our baking powder in and then to boil off our little pretzel bites for 30 seconds. So that will all be happening by the time I come back to divide the dough into the small pieces. So my dough has been doubling in size, and that is doubled in size now, and that's taken about 40 minutes. So I'm going to pull that out onto my work surface, and I'll just scrape down to get the remaining little bit out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just form that back into a ball like that, and I'm going to divide that into 4 pieces, fairly equal, but I'm not going to bother weighing it. And then I'm going to take each piece and I'm going to roll it out into a rope which is about 22 inches in length, which is slightly shorter than the mat that I'm rolling it on, so I'll know when I'm roughly there. And again, I'm not going to be too precise. And that's good enough. And then I'm going to cut that into pieces which are about 1.5 inches in length, and I'm just going to measure the first one just to give me an idea of how big I want them. And it doesn't matter if some are bigger than others. And I'm going to put them onto my baking tray, and my water is boiling, or just about boiling now. And do the same with the remaining dough. And I've cut my 4 pieces of dough into those little pieces, and my water is just about boiling now, and I've actually not put all of the water into the saucepan at the moment, because as the baking powder goes in, it tends to froth up and I don't want it to overflow. So I'll show you that. And I can just see some bubbles starting to appear on the water, so I'm going to spoon in my baking soda a little bit at a time. Like that, and then I'm going to top that up with the extra water, and leave that to come back up to the boil. And with the water boiling, I'm going to drop in the pieces of dough, and I'm going to let them cook for about 30 seconds. I'm not going to overcrowd the pan. And then I'm going to take them out, draining the excess liquid off, and put them onto a baking tray. And do the same with the remainder. So with all of my pieces boiled in the baking soda solution, I've beaten my egg, and I'm going to brush over the top of each one with just a little bit of egg. So I've brushed those and they're fine. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply sprinkle some salt over some of them. Like that. And then sprinkle some sesame seeds over some of the others. Just very quickly and roughly. And for the remainder, I'm not going to sprinkle anything at all, because we're going to brush those in butter and then put some cinnamon sugar on them. So I'm going to put both of I have two trays, and I'm going to put both my trays into the oven, and I'm going to bake them for 16 or 17 minutes, something like that, until they've browned very nicely. Then I'll take them out of the oven and put them onto a wire rack so that they can begin to cool down, and I'll come back and we'll finish off with the cinnamon version. So I baked my pretzel bites for 16 minutes, and they coloured nice and dark, as I said they would with that diastatic malt powder. And I've put the salted ones and the sesame seed ones onto a wire rack, and I'm just going to simply brush some butter on the top of the remaining ones. Now you could actually coat them entirely in butter and toss them in cinnamon sugar, but I'm actually simply going to brush the tops and sprinkle them on over the top with cinnamon sugar using a tea strainer or a sifter, basically. So having put some butter on all of them, I'm simply going to take a fairly fine tea strainer, and I'm going to take some of my cinnamon sugar, put it in the tea strainer, and just sprinkle it over like that. And any remaining cinnamon sugar will go into a jar and be kept for another occasion. And then I'm going to put those onto the rack as well, and I'm going to leave them to cool down. So there are the pretzel bites. I'll leave those for 15 minutes or so, then I'll come back and I'll have a taste of them. So my pretzel bites have cooled down just a little bit. They're still slightly warm, but I'm ready to have a taste of them. In fact, I've already had a taste of them, but I'll show you them again. So they look very good, and they're nice and soft. Whoops. And squeezy, as you can see. So I have a taste of this one, which has got salt on it. The exterior is lovely and chewy, as pretzels are. Inside it's nice and light and soft. Very, very good indeed. I've also tasted the sesame ones and the cinnamon ones, and I used Ceylon cinnamon, which is a different type of cinnamon to the more common cassia cinnamon. Has lovely overtones to it, and it's a milder flavour basically. Very, very good. So all three of these turned out just as I would like them. So that's going to be it for this recipe. Oh, I ought to say you can freeze these and then take them out and warm them through if you want to, but you can freeze them. You can even freeze the dough in the little chunks before you bake them, before you boil them and bake them. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there'll be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.